There was a girl in room 14B at Greenfield Middle School, who most people forgot existed the moment they looked away from her. Her name was Hannah, and she was 12 years old. She sat in the last row near the window where the sunlight came through in the afternoon and made everything feel warm and sleepy most days. She would watch the dust floating in those golden beams of light and wonder if anyone would notice if she just disappeared completely. The answer was probably no. Hannah was not the kind of girl who made noise or demanded attention. She was not the kind of girl who raised her hand in class or laughed loudly with friends in the hallways. She was the opposite of all those things. She was quiet in a way that made people uncomfortable. She was invisible in a way that made people forget she was even there. Her classmates had all sorts of ideas about who she was, even though none of them had ever really talked to her. Some thought she was shy, some thought she was stuck up, some thought she was just weird. A few of the meaner kids called her Ghost Girl because she moved through the school like she was barely there at all. Teachers had their own opinions too. They wrote things on her report cards like needs to participate more and should try to engage with peers and has potential but lacks confidence. Those words followed her from grade to grade like a shadow she could not shake off. But here's the thing about Hannah that nobody knew. Here's the secret she carried with her every single day. When she went home to the small apartment she shared with her mother on the third floor of a building with a broken elevator and hallways that always smelled like cooking spices, when she dropped her heavy backpack by the door and kicked off her worn-out shoes when she walked past the tiny kitchen and the living room that was also her mother's bedroom. She would go to the corner of the apartment where an old piano sat against the wall. It was not a fancy piano. The wood was scratched and faded. Some of the keys were yellowed with age. One of the pedals squeaked when you pressed it. But to Hannah, this piano was the most beautiful thing in the world. It had belonged to her grandmother, a woman Hannah remembered only in pieces and fragments. The smell of jasmine tea, soft, wrinkled hands that felt like paper, a voice that hummed old melodies while cooking dinner. Her grandmother had passed away when Hannah was 7 years old. But before she died, she made Hannah promise one thing. She made her promise to never stop playing, and Hannah had kept that promise. Every single day for 5 years she had sat at that piano and played at. First, she was terrible. Her small fingers could barely stretch across the keys. She hit wrong notes constantly. She got frustrated and cried and wanted to give up 100 times. But something kept pulling her back. Something in the music felt like home. Something in the melodies felt like her grandmother was still there, sitting beside her, guiding her hands, showing her the way. So she practiced. She practiced when she should have been doing homework. She practiced when other kids were outside playing. She practiced until her fingers ached and her back hurt from hunching over the keys. She watched videos online of famous pianists and studied the way their hands moved. She found old music books at thrift stores and taught herself pieces that were way too hard for someone her age. She failed over and over again, but she also got better little by little. Note by note, she got better. By the time she was 10, she could play songs that made her mother stop whatever she was doing and just listen. By the time she was 11, she could play pieces that brought tears to her mother's eyes. By the time she was 12, she could play things that most adults spent decades trying to master. But nobody at school knew any of this. Nobody had ever heard her play. Nobody had ever even seen her near a musical instrument at school. She was just the quiet girl who sat in the back, the girl who mumbled when teachers called on her, the girl who ate lunch alone in the corner of the cafeteria with a book in front of her face, the girl who seemed to shrink smaller and smaller every time someone looked at her. There was a boy in her class named Tony who loved to make jokes at other people's expense. He was not a bad kid, really. He just liked attention, and making fun of the quiet girl was an easy way to get laughs. One day in October, he walked past Hannah's desk and knocked her pencil case onto the floor. All her pens and erasers scattered everywhere. The kids nearby laughed. Tony grinned and said, "Oops, sorry, Ghost Girl didn't see you there." Hannah said nothing. She never said anything. She just bent down and picked up her things, one by one, while her face burned red with embarrassment. That night she went home and played piano for 3 hours straight. She played until her fingers were sore and her eyes were blurry with tears she refused to let fall. Music poured out of her like water breaking through a dam. All the loneliness, all the frustration, all the sadness of being unseen and unheard, it all came out through the keys. Her mother stood in the doorway and watched. She did not interrupt. She knew better than to interrupt when Hannah was playing like this. When Hannah finally stopped, her mother walked over and sat beside her on the small piano bench. They sat in silence for a while. Then her mother spoke. "You know, your grandmother used to say that some people talk with their mouths and some people talk with their souls. She said you were always going to be the second kind." Hannah looked at her mother. What does that even mean? It means that one day the world is going to hear you, and when they do, they are going to wonder how they ever missed someone so extraordinary. Hannah wanted to believe that she really did, but it was hard to believe you were extraordinary when everyone around you treated you like you were nothing. It was hard to believe you had something special when the world kept telling you that you were less than. Her mother worked long hours at the hospital. She was a nurse on the night shift, which meant she left for work when the sun went down and came home when Hannah was getting ready for school. They did not have much money. Their apartment was small and old. Hannah's clothes were mostly secondhand. She did not have the newest phone or the coolest shoes or any of the things the other kids seemed to have, but they had the piano and they had each other. That was enough. At least Hannah told herself it was enough. But deep down in the quiet places of her heart, she wanted more. She wanted to be seen. She wanted to be heard. She wanted anyone to look at her and recognize that there was more to her than the shy girl in the back. Roshi just did not know how to make that happen. She did not know how to bridge the gap between who she was at home and who she was at school. At home she was powerful. At home her fingers created magic. At home she was alive. But at school, all that power seemed to drain out of her. At school, she became small and afraid. At school, she could barely make eye contact with people, let alone show them the fire that burned inside hers. So she kept her 2 lives separate. She kept the music hidden away like a secret treasure that was too precious to share with a world that might not understand. She kept her head down and her mouth shut and tried to survive each day until she could go home and be herself again. That was her life. That was her routine. Wake up, go to school, be invisible, come home, play piano, repeat. She thought it would always be that way. She thought she would finish middle school and then high school, and maybe her whole life would pass by without anyone ever really knowing who she was. She had accepted that, or at least she thought she had. But life has a funny way of changing when you least expect it sometimes. The universe puts something in your path that forces you to choose stay hidden and safe, or step into the light and risk everything. Hannah did not know it yet, but that choice was coming. It was coming faster than she could have imagined. When it arrived, nothing would ever be the same again. It was a Tuesday morning in late October when everything changed. Hannah was sitting in her usual spot by the window, watching the autumn leaves fall from the big oak tree outside. The classroom was noisy as always, with kids talking and laughing and throwing paper balls at each other before the first bell rang. She had her notebook open, pretending to read something, but really she was just trying to be invisible like she did every day. Then the speaker on the wall crackled to life. "Everyone, quiet down," said their teacher, Mr. Webb, a tired-looking man with glasses that were always sliding down his nose. "The principal is about to make an announcement." The room got a little quieter, though not completely silent, because no classroom of 12-year-olds is ever truly quiet. Principal Rodrigo had a deep voice that always sounded like he was about to say something very important, even when he was just talking about cafeteria rules. "Good morning, Greenfield Middle School. I have some exciting news to share with all of you today. As many of you know, our annual winter talent show is coming up in 6 weeks, but this year we have something very special planned. Hannah was only half listening. Talent shows were for the popular kids. The singers and dancers and comedians who love being on stage. They had nothing to do with someone like her. But then, the principal said something that made her stop breathing. This year we will be joined by a special guest. Mr. Frederick Chun from the Whitmore Academy of Music will be attending our talent show. For those who do not know, Whitmore Academy is one of the most prestigious music schools in the country, and Mr. Chen has generously offered to provide a full scholarship to any student who demonstrates exceptional musical talent. The classroom erupted with excited chatter. A scholarship to a real music. School kids started talking over each other about who was going to enter and what they were going to perform. Hannah sat frozen in her seat. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Whitmore Academy, she had heard of it before. She had looked at their website late at night when she could not sleep. She had watched videos of their students performing in concert halls around the world. She had dreamed of going there the way some kids dream of becoming astronauts or movie stars. It was impossible, of course. The tuition was more money than her mother made in 5 years. There was no way they could ever afford it. But a scholarship, a full scholarship that changed everything for the rest of the day. Hannah could not focus on anything. She went through her classes like a ghost, even more than usual. Her mind kept spinning with possibilities and fears. Could she really do this? Could she really get up on a stage in front of the whole school and play piano? The thought made her want to throw up. She had never performed for anyone except her mother. She had never even told anyone at school that she played. What if she messed up? What if she forgot the notes? What if everyone laughed at her? But underneath all that fear was something else. A tiny spark of hope that refused to go out. This could be her chance. Her one chance to change her life. One chance to honor her grandmother and all those years of practice. Her one chance to become something more than the invisible girl in the back row that night. She told her mother about the announcement. Mother was getting ready for work, putting on her nurse's uniform and pulling her hair back into a ponytail. She stopped what she was doing and looked at Hannah with wide eyes. A scholarship to Whitmore. Hannah nodded. But I would have to perform in the talent show in front of everyone. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then she walked over and took Hannah's hands in hers. Do you want to do this? I don't know. Yes, but also no, I'm scared. Her mother smiled, that soft smile she always had when Hannah was struggling with something big. Being scared is not a reason not to do something. Being scared just means it matters to you. She squeezed Hannah's hands. Your grandmother would want you to try, you know that, right? Hannah felt tears prick at her eyes. She nodded. Her mother kissed her forehead. Then, try whatever happens. At least you will know you tried. The next morning, there was a sign-up sheet posted outside the main office. Hannah stood in front of it for 10 minutes, just staring at the blank lines. Other kids walked by and wrote their names without hesitation. A girl named Priya, who everyone knew had an amazing singing voice. A group of boys who were going to do some kind of dance routine. A kid from 8th grade who did magic tricks at every school event. They all signed up like it was nothing. Like putting yourself out there was the easiest thing in the world. Hannah watched them and felt smaller than ever. Then she heard a voice behind her. What are you doing here, ghost girl? She turned and saw Tony standing there with 2 of his friends. They were all grinning like they had just caught her doing something embarrassing. You thinking about signing up? Tony laughed. What would you even do, stand on stage and be quiet at everyone? His friends cracked up. Hannah felt her face go red. She wanted to run away. She wanted to disappear into the floor and never come back, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the memory of her grandmother's hands on hers. Maybe it was her mother's words from the night before. Maybe it was just years of anger and frustration finally bubbling up to the surface. She turned back to the sign-up sheet. She picked up the pen and she wrote her name, Hannah Park Piano. Her handwriting was shaky, but it was there. It was real. Tony stopped laughing. Wait, you actually play piano? Hannah did not answer. She just put the pen down and walked away. Her heart was beating so fast she thought she might pass out, but she did not look back. She could hear Tony and his friends talking behind her. "No way, Ghost Girl plays piano this. I gotta see." She knew they were going to make fun of her. She knew the whole school would probably know by lunch. She knew she had just made herself a target, but she also knew something else. She had taken the first step. There was no going back now. The end of the day, everyone had heard the news. That weird, quiet girl signed up for the talent show. One who never talks. She says she plays piano, can you believe? And Hannah heard the whispers everywhere. She went in the hallways, in the cafeteria, in the bathroom where girls talked, like she was not standing right there. Most of the comments were skeptical. "I bet she can barely play chopsticks. She probably just wants attention. This is going to be so awkward to watch." But some were just plain mean. Why would she embarrass herself like that? Does she actually think she can win? Someone should tell her to drop out before she humiliates herself. Hannah absorbed it all like a sponge, every cruel word, every mocking laugh, every eye roll and snicker. It hurt more than she wanted to admit. That night she sat at her piano, but she did not play. She just stared at the keys and wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was setting herself up for the biggest humiliation of her life. Maybe she should just go to school tomorrow and take her name off the list and go back to being invisible. It was safer that way, easier. Her mother found her sitting there in the dark. "What is wrong?" Hannah told her about the whispers and the mean comments and the way everyone looked at her like she was a joke. Her mother listened without interrupting. When Hannah was done, she sat down next to her on the piano bench. "Can I tell you something about your grandmother?" Hannah nodded. "When she was young, she wanted to be a concert pianist. She was good enough too, but her family told her it was a waste of time. They said she should focus on practical things. They said music was not a real career, so she gave up. She got married and had children and worked regular jobs her whole life, and she never performed for anyone, not once." Her mother paused. "She told me once that it was her biggest regret, not the life she lived. She was happy with her family, but the fact that she let other people's opinions stop her from even trying. She never knew what could have been, and that haunted her until the day she died." Hannah felt tears rolling down her cheeks. "That is why she made you promise to keep playing." Her mother put an arm around her. "She did not want you to make the same mistake she did. She wanted you to be brave enough to try, even if it was scary, even if people doubted you, even if you might fail." Hannah leaned into her mother's shoulder and cried. She cried for her grandmother who never got her chance. She cried for herself and all the fear she was carrying. She cried because she knew what she had to do, even though it terrified her. When she finally stopped crying, she wiped her eyes and looked at the piano. She put her fingers on the keys, and she started to play. The music filled the small apartment. It floated out through the thin walls and into the night. It was not a performance. It was a promise to her grandmother, a promise to her mother, a promise to herself. She was going to do this, no matter what anyone said, no matter how scared she was. She was going to walk onto that stage and show them all who she really was. The countdown had begun. 6 weeks until the talent show. 6 weeks until everything changed. Hannah practiced until midnight that night. When she finally went to bed, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. The first week of practice went better than Hannah expected. She had chosen a piece by Chopin called Ballade No. 1 in G minor. It was the same piece her grandmother used to play on Sunday afternoons when the whole apartment smelled like home cooked food and everything felt safe and warm. It was also one of the hardest piano pieces ever written. Most professional pianists spent years perfecting it. Hannah had been working on it for almost 8 months, and she still was not sure she had it right. But something about this piece felt important. It felt like the only thing she could play that would truly show who she was. So she practiced every day after school. She rushed home and sat at the piano. She played the same sections over and over until her fingers knew them by heart. She closed her eyes and tried to feel the music instead of just playing the notes. She pushed herself harder than she ever had before. School things got worse. Word had spread that the quiet girl thought she could play piano, and most people treated it like a big joke. Kids she had never even talked to would walk past her in the hallway and pretend to play invisible pianos while their friends laughed. Someone taped a piece of paper to her locker that said talent show more like embarrassment show. Tony and his crew made piano sounds with their mouths every time she walked by. Hannah tried to ignore all of it. She kept her head down and focused on getting through each day, but the cruelty wore on her little by little like water dripping on a stone. She started having trouble sleeping. She would lie awake at night, running through the music in her head and imagining everything that could go wrong. What if her hands started shaking and she could not control them? What if she forgot a section in the middle and just sat there in silence? What if the whole school laughed at her and she had to walk off stage in shame? These thoughts circled in her brain like vultures waiting for something to die by. The third week she was exhausted. Her grades started slipping because she could not focus on homework. She had dark circles under her eyes from lack of sleep. Her appetite disappeared and she barely touched her food at dinner. Her mother noticed. You are pushing yourself too hard. After the talent show is in 3 weeks. I know, but you cannot perform well if you destroy yourself before you even get there. Hannah knew her mother was right, but she did not know how to slow down. The pressure was building inside her like steam in a kettle. She felt like if she stopped practicing for even one day, everything would fall apart. Then something happened that nearly broke her completely. It was a Thursday afternoon, and Hannah was walking to her locker after last period. The hallway was crowded with kids rushing to get to their buses and rides home. She was not paying attention to anything except the floor in front of her feet. That is when she heard at a piano. Someone was playing a piano somewhere nearby. She followed the sound to the music room at the end of the hall. The door was open just a crack, and she peeked inside. There was a girl sitting at the big grand piano that the school used for concerts and recitals. Hannah recognized her. Her name was Vivian, and she was in 8th grade. She was one of those kids who seemed to have everything: good looks, nice clothes, lots of friends, and apparently she could also play piano really, really well. Hannah stood frozen in the doorway, listening as Vivian played through a complicated piece with perfect technique. Her fingers moved across the keys like they were dancing. Every note was clean and precise and beautiful. When she finished, a small group of kids who had been watching clapped and cheered. That was amazing. Viv, you are definitely going to win the scholarship. Is yours for sure. Vivian smiled and flipped her long hair over her shoulder. Thanks, guys. I've been practicing this piece for 2 years. There is no way anyone at this school can compete with that. Hannah felt her heart sink into her stomach. 2 years. Vivian had been preparing for 2 years, and she was already that good. How could Hannah possibly compete with that? She backed away from the door quietly and walked to her locker in a daze. All the confidence she had been building up crumbled like a sandcastle hit by a wave. What was she thinking? She was just a nobody, a ghost girl who taught herself piano in a tiny apartment with an old broken-down instrument. Vivian had probably been taking lessons her whole life. She probably had expensive teachers and a beautiful grand piano at home. She probably performed at recitals and competitions all the time. Hannah had none of that. She had nothing. That night she could not bring herself to practice. She sat on her bed and stared at the wall and felt emptier than she had ever felt in her life. Her mother came home from work at her usual late hour and found Hannah still sitting there in the dark. What happened? Hannah told her about Vivian, about how good she was, about how everyone already assumed she would win, about how pointless it seemed to even try anymore. Her mother listened, and when Hannah was done, she did not say anything right away. She just sat down on the bed next to her daughter and took her hand. Then, after a long moment, she spoke. Do you know why I fell in love with your father? Hannah shook her head. Her father had left when she was 3 years old. She barely remembered him, and her mother almost never talked about him. He was not the smartest guy I ever met. He was not the richest or the most handsome, but he had this way of believing in things that nobody else believed in. He would get this look in his eyes when he talked about his dreams, and it made you want to believe. Her mother paused. The problem was he only believed in things when they were easy. The moment things got hard, he gave up. That is why he left, not because he did not love us, but because loving us was hard, and he did not know how to do hard things. She turned to look at Hannah. I see so much of him in you sometimes, that same fire in your eyes when you play piano, that same ability to make people feel something. But I also see something different. I see someone who does not run when things get tough. I see someone who has been fighting her whole life, even when nobody noticed. Hannah felt tears streaming down her face. Vivian might have better training than you. She might have more experience and more resources, but she does not have what you have. She does not have a grandmother who poured her soul into teaching you. She does not have years of playing through loneliness and pain and turning it into something beautiful. She does not have your story. Her mother squeezed her hand. You are not competing against Vivian. You are not competing against anyone. Are just showing the world who you are. That is all. If they see it, great. If they do not, that is their loss. But you cannot let fear of losing stop you from playing. Hannah wiped her eyes. What if I mess up? Then you mess up. So, well, you get up and you try again. That is what life is, getting knocked down and getting back up over and over until you do not have any getting up left. And even then, you find a way. They sat together in the dark for a long time. Hannah thought about everything her mother had said. She thought about her grandmother and the promise she had made. She thought about all the hours she had spent at that old piano, learning and growing and becoming who she was. Maybe her mother was right. Maybe this was not about winning or losing. Maybe this was about something bigger. Maybe this was about finally letting her voice be heard. After years of silence, she got up from the bed and walked to the piano. Her mother watched, but did not say anything. Hannah sat down and put her fingers on the keys. She took a deep breath and she started to play. The music came out shaky at first. Her hands were tired and her heart was heavy. But as she kept playing, something shifted. The notes started to flow more easily. The emotions started to build. The fear started to fade by. The time she reached the end of the piece, she was crying again. But this time, they were not tears of despair. They were tears of release. She had been carrying so much weight for so long. The pressure of the competition, the cruelty of her classmates, the fear of failure, the memory of her grandmother, all of it had been crushing her. But in that moment, sitting at the piano in the middle of the night, she let it all go. She stopped trying to be perfect. She stopped trying to prove anything to anyone. She just played, and it was the most beautiful thing she had ever done. Her mother was crying too. When the last note faded into silence, she walked over and hugged Hannah from behind. That is what you need to do on that stage. Just that. Just be yourself. Hannah nodded. She finally understood. The talent show was not about technical skill or impressive performances. It was about truth. And Hannah had more truth in her than she had ever realized. 2 weeks left. 2 weeks until she would walk onto that stage and show the world who she really was. She was still scared. But now the fear felt different. It felt like energy instead of weight. It felt like fuel instead of chains. She was ready to burn. Morning of the talent show, Hannah woke up before her alarm. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, while her heart pounded against her ribs like it was trying to escape. This was it. Day she had been dreading and dreaming about for 6 weeks. The day everything would change one way or another. She got up and went to the bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were tired, but there was something else in them too, something that had not been there before. Quiet determination that surprised even her. She got dressed in the nicest clothes she owned, a simple black dress that her mother had bought at a thrift store last year. It was not fancy or expensive, but it fit her well and made her feel like she was someone who belonged on a stage. Her mother had already left for her shift at the hospital. But she had left a note on the kitchen table. I wish I could be there tonight, but I will be with you in spirit. Play. For Grandma, play for yourself. Play like nobody is watching. I love you more than all the stars. Hannah read the note 3 times and folded it carefully and put it in her pocket. She would carry it with her onto the stage, a small piece of her mother to give her strength. School that day was a blur. Everyone was talking about the talent show, who was going to win, who was going to embarrass themselves. The usual gossip and speculation that filled the hallways before any big event. Hannah kept to herself as always. She sat through her classes without hearing a word the teachers said. She ate lunch alone in her usual corner, but could not swallow more than a few bites. Her stomach was too twisted up with nerves. The afternoon dragged on forever. Every minute felt like an hour. Every hour felt like a day. But finally the last bell rang, and it was time. The talent show was being held in the school auditorium, a big room with red velvet seats and a wooden stage and heavy curtains that smelled like dust and old dreams. Hannah had never been backstage before. She walked through the side door and found herself in a world of chaos. Kids running around in costumes, teachers shouting instructions, someone testing the microphone over and over. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Performers were supposed to wait in a small room behind the stage until it was their turn. Hannah found a chair in the corner and sat down and tried to make herself invisible. It was what she was best at after all. There were 15 acts in the show. Hannah was number 14, Vivian was number 13, which meant Hannah would have to go right after the person everyone expected to win. Great, just great. The show started at 7 o'clock. Hannah could hear the audience filing in through the thin walls. The sound of hundreds of voices talking and laughing and finding their seats. She tried not to think about all those people, all those eyes that would soon be watching her, all those mouths ready to laugh if she failed. One by one, the acts went on. A boy did a comedy routine that got big laughs. A group of girls performed a dance number to a popular song. Someone sang an emotional ballad that made a few people cry. A kid did magic tricks that actually impressed everyone. Each time an act finished, Hannah heard the applause through the walls. Some got polite clapping, some got cheers and whistles. She wondered what sound she would hear when she was done. Probably silence or worse, laughter. The hours crawled by, act after act. The room backstage slowly emptied as performers went on and then left. Finally, there were only 3 people left: Hannah, Vivian, and a boy who was doing some kind of yo-yo performance. For Act 15, Vivian was sitting across the room, looking completely calm and confident. She was wearing a beautiful blue dress that probably cost more than Hannah's entire wardrobe. Her hair was perfectly styled. Her makeup was flawless. She looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. She caught Hannah staring and smiled. Not a mean smile exactly, but not a friendly one either. Nervous Hannah shook her head, even though it was a lie. Vivian shrugged. You should have been preparing for this for a long time. Good luck, though. You will need it before Hannah could respond. A teacher poked her head in. Vivian, you're up. Vivian stood and smoothed her dress and walked out like she was walking onto a runway. Hannah was alone now, except for the yo-yo kid who was practicing in the corner. She could hear the announcer introducing Vivian, could hear the audience murmuring with anticipation. Then the music started and it was incredible. Vivian's piece was complex and impressive. Her technique was flawless. Every note rang out with perfect clarity. The audience was completely silent, which meant they were completely captivated. Hannah felt her confidence crumbling again. How could she follow that? How could anyone follow that? The piece went on for almost 8 minutes. When it ended, the applause was thunderous. Cheers and whistles and people shouting bravo. Hannah felt sick. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear through the back door and never come back. She could still drop out. Nobody would be surprised. Ghost girl chickened out, that is what they would say, and then they would forget about her like they always did. But then she felt the note in her pocket. Her mother's words, play for Grandma, play for yourself, play like nobody is watching. And she thought about her grandmother. A Woman who never got her chance. A woman who lived her whole life wondering what could have been. Hannah did not want to be that person. She did not want to spend the rest of her life wondering, even if she failed, even if everyone laughed. At least she would know she tried. The teacher appeared in the doorway. Hannah, you are next. Her legs felt like jelly as she stood up. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to clench them into fists. She walked toward the stage. Each step felt like walking through water, heavy and slow and dreamlike. She reached the wings and looked out at the stage. The grand piano sat in the center under a single spotlight. It looked huge and terrifying and beautiful all at once. Beyond it, she could see the audience, hundreds of faces in the darkness, teachers and students and parents, and somewhere out there a man from Whitmore Academy who held her future in his hands. The announcer was speaking. Our next performer is a 6th grader. For Mr. Webb's class, please welcome to the stage Hannah Park. There was scattered applause, nothing like what Vivian had received. Hannah heard a few snickers from somewhere in the crowd. Someone whispered loud enough for her to hear, "This is the ghost girl. This should be hilarious." She walked onto the stage. The spotlight was blinding. She could not see individual faces anymore, just a sea of shadows stretching out before her. Legs carried her to the piano, even though she was not sure how. She sat down on the bench. The leather was cold beneath her. The keys stretched out in front of her, black and white and waiting. She placed her fingers on them. They were trembling so hard, she was afraid she would hit the wrong notes before she even started. The auditorium fell silent. Everyone was watching. Everyone was waiting, some to see her succeed, most to see her fail. Hannah closed her eyes. She took a deep breath, and she thought about her grandmother. She thought about sitting on her lap as a little girl while those old, wrinkled hands guided hers across the keys. She thought about the smell of jasmine tea and the sound of humming, and the feeling of being completely loved. She thought about all those nights alone at the piano, when music was the only thing that made sense. She thought about her mother working double shifts so they could keep that old piano. She thought about every person who had ever looked through her like she was not there. And something shifted inside her. The fear did not disappear, but it moved aside. It made room for something else, something bigger, something that had been waiting her whole life to come out. She opened her eyes, and she began to play. The first notes of Chopin's Ballade filled the auditorium, soft and delicate like raindrops on a window, then building, growing, swelling into something powerful and unstoppable. Hannah's fingers moved across the keys like they had a life of their own. She was not thinking about technique anymore. She was not thinking about the audience or the judges or the scholarship. She was not thinking at all. She was just feeling, and the music poured out of her like water from a broken dam. Every lonely night, every cruel word, every moment of invisibility, every dream she had been too afraid to speak out loud, it all came out through her fingers and into the piano and out into the world. The piece climbed and crashed like waves against rocks. It whispered and screamed and wept and laughed. It told a story that words could never tell, the story of a girl who had been silent for so long, the story of a grandmother who never got her chance, the story of a mother who worked so hard to give her daughter the life she deserved, the story of music itself and what it means to let your soul speak. Hannah played for almost 9 minutes. She did not miss a single note. She did not hesitate or stumble or falter. She played like her life depended on it, because in a way it did. When she hit the final chord, the sound rang out through the auditorium and slowly faded into silence. Total, complete, absolute silence. Hands dropped to her lap. She sat there on the bench, breathing hard, with sweat on her forehead and tears on her cheeks. She had done it. Whatever happened next, she had done it. She had let the world hear her voice, and for one long, terrible moment, nothing happened. The silence stretched on and on and on. Then someone in the back of the auditorium stood up and started clapping. Then another person and another, and suddenly the whole room was on its feet. The applause was deafening louder. than anything Hannah had ever heard. People were cheering and shouting, and some were crying. Teachers stood with their mouths open. Students, who had mocked her just hours ago, were clapping so hard, their hands must have hurt. The sound washed over Hannah. Like a wave, she could not move, she could not breathe, she could not believe what was happening. They were clapping for her. Ghost girl, the invisible girl. The girl nobody ever noticed. They were giving her a standing ovation. And in that moment, Hannah finally understood something her grandmother had tried to tell her all those years. Go music is not about being seen. It is about being heard. And after 12 years of silence, Hannah had finally been heard. The applause would not stop. Hannah sat at the piano bench, unable to move while the sound crashed over her like thunder. People were still standing, still clapping, still cheering. It felt like a dream. The kind of dream where everything is too bright and too loud and too good to be real. Finally, she found the strength to stand up. Her legs wobbled beneath her, but she managed to take a small bow. Cheering got even louder. She walked off the stage in a daze. Her whole body was shaking, not from fear this time, but from something else entirely. Relief, maybe, or shock, or the feeling of a lifetime of pressure finally releasing all at once. Backstage, the yo-yo kid was waiting for his turn. He looked at her with wide eyes. That was insane. How did you do that? Hannah did not have an answer. She just shook her head and kept walking. She found a quiet corner and sat down on an old wooden crate and tried to catch her breath. Her hands were still trembling. She looked at them and could not believe these were the same hands that had just played in front of hundreds of people a few minutes later. The show ended. The yo-yo kid did his performance and got respectable applause, but nothing like what Hannah had received then. Principal Rodrigo took the stage to announce the results. Hannah could hear his voice through the walls, but could not make out the words. Her heart started pounding again. The scholarship. She had almost forgotten about it in the chaos of everything else. What if Vivian still won? What if technique and training mattered more than whatever Hannah had done up there? She would not blame them if they chose Vivian. Vivian's performance had been technically perfect, flawless. In every way, Hannah knew her own playing had mistakes, tiny imperfections that a trained ear would catch. Maybe emotion was not enough. Maybe raw feeling could not compete with years of expensive lessons. The door to the backstage area opened and a teacher poked her head in. Hannah, they want you on stage. Hannah's stomach dropped. This was it. She stood up and walked back toward the stage. The lights seemed even brighter than before. The audience was still in their seats, buzzing with conversation. Principal Rodrigo stood at the microphone with a man Hannah did not recognize. He was older with gray hair and kind eyes, and he wore a suit that looked like it cost more than everything in Hannah's apartment combined. This must be the man from Whitmore Academy. Hannah walked to center stage and stood next to Vivian, who was already there. Vivian's face was hard to read. She did not look angry exactly, but she did not look happy either. There was something in her eyes that might have been respect, or maybe surprise, or maybe she was just trying to figure out how she had been upstaged by a ghost girl. Principal Rodrigo cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming to our annual talent show. We saw some incredible performances tonight, but now it is time to announce the winner of the Whitmore Academy Scholarship. He turned to the man in the expensive suit. Mr. Chun, would you like to do the honors? The man stepped up to the microphone. His voice was warm and measured, like someone who had given many speeches before. I have been scouting young talent for Whitmore Academy for over 20 years. I have seen thousands of performances, some technically brilliant, some emotionally moving. Very rarely do I see both in the same performer. He paused and looked at Vivian. Young lady, your technique is extraordinary. You have clearly worked very hard, and you should be proud of what you have accomplished. Vivian smiled, but there was tension in it. She knew what was coming. Then Mr. Chun turned to Hannah. But you, he shook his head slowly. In 20 years, I have never experienced anything quite like what you did tonight. You did not just play the piano, you spoke through it. You told a story that made every person in this room feel something deep in their chest. That is not something that can be taught. That is a gift. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. She blinked hard, trying to hold them back. The scholarship goes to Hannah Park. Audience erupted again. More cheering, more applause. Hannah felt hands patting her on the back and voices congratulating her, but it all blended together into a blur of noise and light. She looked out at the crowd and wished more than anything that her mother could be there, that her grandmother could be there. But then she remembered the note in her pocket. Play for Grandma, play for yourself. They had been there in their own way. They had been with her the whole time. After the ceremony ended, people swarmed around Hannah. Teachers who had barely noticed her before were suddenly telling her how they always knew she was special. Kids who had called her Ghost Girl were asking where she learned to play like that. Even Tony pushed through the crowd to talk to her. His bore face looked different than usual, softer somehow, less like he was looking for a joke. Hannah braced herself for whatever mean comment was coming. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for all the stuff I said. I did not know you could do that. Nobody knew. Hannah studied his face for signs of sarcasm, but found none. He actually meant it. Thanks, that is all she said, but it was enough. Tony nodded and walked away. And Hannah realized something. She did not hate him. She did not hate any of them. They had been cruel, yes, but they had also been ignorant. They did not know her, because she had never let them know her. She had been so busy hiding that she never gave anyone a chance to see. That was going to change. Vivian approached her next. Hannah tensed up, expecting coldness or resentment. But Vivian surprised her. That was beautiful. I mean, I have been playing piano since I was 4 years old. I have had the best teachers money can buy, but I have never been able to make people cry like you did. Hannah did not know what to say. How did you do it? Hannah thought about the question. I do not know. I just played. What? I felt I stopped trying to be perfect and just let it out. Vivian nodded slowly, like she was processing something important. Maybe that is what I have been missing. I'm so focused on getting every note right that I forget why I started playing in the first place. She held out her hand. Congratulations, you deserved to win. Hannah shook her hand. You were amazing, Toy. Mean that Vivian smiled, and this time it was genuine. See you at Whitmore. Maybe I hear they accept more than one student per year. Then she walked away, and Hannah felt something she had never expected to feel toward Vivian, something like friendship, or at least the beginning of it. The crowd eventually thinned out, and Hannah found herself alone on the empty stage. The auditorium was quiet now. Just her and the grand piano under the dim work lights. She sat down at the bench one more time and let her fingers rest on the keys. She did not play. She just sat there taking it all in. A few hours ago, she had walked onto this stage as nobody, the invisible girl, the expected failure. Now everything was different. She had a scholarship to one of the best music schools in the country. She had the respect of her classmates. She had proven to herself that she was capable of more than she ever imagined. But the thing that mattered most was not any of that. The thing that mattered most was that she had kept her promise. Her grandmother had asked her to never stop playing, and she never had, even when it was hard, even when nobody was listening, even when the world told her she was nothing. She had kept playing, and now her grandmother's dream was going to live on through her. Hannah pulled out the note from her pocket and read it one more time. Love you more than all the stars. She folded it carefully and held it against her heart. I did it, Grandma. I did it, Mom. The door at the back of the auditorium creaked open. Hannah looked up and saw her mother walking down the aisle. She was still wearing her nurse's uniform. Her hair was messy from a long shift. Her eyes were red like she had been crying. You came. I got someone to cover the last hour of my shift. I could not miss this. Her mother climbed onto the stage and pulled Hannah into a hug so tight it almost hurt her. Teacher showed me a video on her phone. Her mother was crying, now not trying to hide it at all. Baby, you were incredible. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud. They held each other for a long time. Two people who had been through so much together. Mother who worked herself to exhaustion so her daughter could have a chance, a daughter who had finally found the courage to take it. When they finally pulled apart, Hannah's mother wiped her eyes and laughed. Your grandmother is up there somewhere losing her mind right now, probably crying harder than both of us. Hannah laughed too. It felt good to laugh. It felt good to stand here in this moment and just be happy. No fear, no doubt, no hiding, just joy. They walked out of the auditorium together, arm in arm. The night air was cold, but Hannah barely noticed. She was too busy thinking about everything that was coming: Whitmore Academy, a real music education, a future she had never dared to imagine. But she was also thinking about something else. All those years of being invisible had taught her something valuable. They had taught her that the world does not always see your worth. Sometimes you have to show them. Sometimes you have to stand up on a stage with shaking hands and a pounding heart and let your soul speak. It is terrifying. It is hard. But it is also the only way to become who you are meant to be. Hannah looked up at the stars scattered across the dark sky. She thought about her grandmother looking down from somewhere up there. She thought about all the girls like her who were sitting alone in their rooms right now, feeling invisible and unimportant, and she made herself a new promise. One day she would use her music to reach those girls. One day she would stand on stages around the world and play for everyone who ever felt unseen. One day she would show them that the quiet ones have the loudest voices. They just need the courage to let them out. That was her new dream, and this time she was not afraid to chase it, because Hannah Park was not invisible anymore. She never would be again.